Hey guys, so some of you were asking for help with this problem. And so the graph is given, and you need to identify whether it's a sine bx or a cosine bx, and also the values for a and b. And sometimes you have a more complex equation where there's another parameter added, C. So let's talk about it in general. So for these specifically, A is amplitude, and B affects your period, and C will affect the shift up and down the scale. So that's in general. So here are those equations written out. A affects the amplitude, B affects the period, and C shifts the graphs up and down. In sine, same as in cosine. So your goal is to identify, first of all, whether it's a sine graph or if it's a cosine graph. And once you do that, then you need to identify the values for A, B, and C. So let's first identify what type of graph you have. We're going to start there. Here are some basic graphs of sine and cosine with unchanged amplitude and unchanged period or shift. Okay, so this is the basic one. So you have to figure out which one are you looking at in your graph. Is it sine or cosine? Well, what are the features? For cosine, it will reach its maximum at when x equals 0. Okay, the sine will reach its maximum when x is pi over 2, and at 0 it actually is 0. It's going to cross the x-axis there at 0. So the difference, cosine reaches its maximum at x equals 0. Sine is 0 when x equals 0. Let's see which one do we have in our. So here I can see that when x equals 0, the graph reaches its maximum. So I'm gonna go with a cosine. I identify it as a cosine. Now, the question is, now, here it's not an issue. The shift up and down is not an issue because it's not even given to you in the equation. So they assume that you assume that there is no shift, and you could see it from the fact that the graph is symmetric about the x-axis. It's not above it, it's not below it, it's not shifted up or down, it's symmetric about the x-axis. So C equals 0. There's no shift up and down. We already concluded that. Now you have to basically figure out the A, which is amplitude. And amplitude is how far does the graph reach from the center. So the center line is 0, right? So how far up, how far down does it go? Well, it's 2 in this case. So I will write that, not assume, but we'll figure it out that A equals 2 for this graph. And the next step would be to figure out the period of the graph. And the period is the distance between the two highest points. That's the easiest way to read the period. So for our graph is pi over 2. So the period is from 0 to pi over 2. The total distance is pi over 2. Now here, so we identified that our period is pi over 2, and the formula is 2 pi over the absolute value of b, where the b is your multiplier in front of x. So we're gonna substitute our pi over 2 in for p, and rewrite the formula. and then solve for b. All right, so in order to do that, we're gonna multiply both sides by b, or the absolute value of b. And also, I'm gonna get rid of pi over 2 and multiply by 2 over pi on both sides. So pi's will 2 pi times pi over 2 becomes 1, and I'm canceling out the absolute values of b, and also pi's will cancel out, so we have 2 times 2 left on the right side. So our absolute value of b equals 4, and I'm just gonna keep a positive 4 for the value of b. There is no reason to have a negative value for b. So now, since we identified our function, we identified a amplitude as being 2 units, and then we identified b as being 4 units. So our function, when we substitute those, will be y equals 2 cosine 4x, and that's the answer for that problem. So let's go ahead and plot it in. Type it in and see if we're right. Check the answer. Yes, so we were correct. We identified all our coefficients correctly, and that's how you do this problem. Let me know if you have any other questions.